As I write this program, Texas is buried under an ice storm. The Northeast is blanketed in a white mess, and just about the entire world is done, D-O-N-E, with this monstrosity called SARS-2 coronavirus. Hi, I'm Dr. Renee Kohansky, and welcome to episode 12 of Clinical Correlation. I have no doubt we all appreciate that the psychiatric COVID morbidity curve continues with a positive M, i.e. the slope of the curve is upwards, meaning psychiatric morbidity is increasing, not decreasing. It may even be bleeding into your own personal lives. I've said in other programs, we humans, for the most part, are socially designed tribal creatures, the sum of our parts being greater than the whole. So when our group is working together well, we accomplish tremendous, more better things typically than we do individually. We can look to pop culture for verification of truisms like this, and I'll even point you to the recently popular Queen's Gambit to confirm this. So it really should come as no surprise that when we are isolated, we decompensate. Let's face it, the ultimate punishment in the correctional system is getting placed in the hole, aka solitary confinement or isolation. Do you get that? The single most awful punishment to inflict upon someone is to put them in a cell by themselves. Think about all the movies with tormented characters desperately alone trying to return to civilization. Castaway, Martian, or even Gravity are examples to name but a few. Think about what occurs in the ICU when patients are deprived of sensory input like clocks or the sun, disorientation. Of course, the ICU is already a compromised situation, but after a year of COVID isolation, perhaps we are all just a bit compromised. And right now, many are experiencing a kind of supersaturation. Do you remember that term from the required chemistry course? You force the concentration of the solute to be more than that allowed by the value from equilibrium. Then, if you add just one more teeny tiny microparticle, you precipitate the whole mess out. And we, my friends, are on the verge of a massive super precipitation from this year of COVID. So what are some of the issues here? While there are many controversial conversations around COVID-19, there are many that are not. For example, we all agree it's highly contagious, and the greatest risk for severe illness from COVID-19 with respect to age is among those aged 85 and older. This is a group that benefits tremendously from continued social engagement. This is a group that is suffering perhaps the most from lack of social engagement, and sadly, this is a group that is currently most at risk from social engagement. Quite the dilemma. But let me proffer some ways to help think about this that might be a little more hopeful. First and foremost, the vaccine is now thankfully being made available to this age group. Unfortunately, we are not nearly aggressive enough in getting this administered to this population, even though we probably have the technology to do this. We seem to be lacking the organization, and for this reason, it will probably take at least another 6 months before it is experienced on a large enough scale to impact a change. Nevertheless, here it is in record-breaking time. Next is something we can think about more macroscopically as the landscape has evolved. Again, it's issues we've touched on in other programs, but let's expand. When this virus first attacked, it was, for all intents and purposes, an alien invasion, and we had every right to quite literally be scared for our life. For all our ingenious design as beings, we were brought to our knees by a piece of nucleic acid. Fear can be an extremely useful emotion. That fight or flight, freeze maybe not so much, response is necessary when deployed properly. And yet, this fear response that was once necessary when overstimulated, constantly used, becomes toxic. Our profession sees this kind of damage in life or death situations manifested in diagnoses like post-traumatic stress disorder. We know how crucial it is that we replace fear response with a higher cortical response once indicated. So let's move this in particular to our most vulnerable population. Our elderly still remain largely isolated by necessity. However, what is not necessary, and I maintain is actually neurotoxic, is this constant diet of fear and uncertainty that is fed through a continuous G-tube of confusing data. The recent snow and ice brought yet one more layer of social isolation. What for some felt like that last molecule that precipitated out, no pun intended, this already supersaturated solution of awful. But guess what? We are all collectively starving to be in community and relationship with one another. We can run a very different counter-narrative conversation because conversation and communication is where it all begins. We can correct misinformation on the transmission of the virus, particularly outdoor transmission. We can stop feeding. This is important. This is where we can impact. We can stop feeding the message of paranoia and mistrust of our neighbors, friends, and family, because this is as much a problem as anything else. Feared, unknown, masked faces counting feet apart from one another may hopefully soon be a thing of the past as the vaccine is disseminated, especially as we are perched on the window of spring. So what else can we do? Well, what we do best, of course, correct cognitive distortions and heal thyself. Some suggestions. First, a brief recommended reading, If by Rudyard Kipling. Next, a word for us to remember and a word for us to be, equanimity, evenness of mind under pressure. Finally, a quote for us and our patients from Albert Camus as I jump seasons one more time. In the depths of winter, I finally learned that within me there lay an invincible summer. I'm Dr. Renee Kohansky for Clinical Correlation.